Welcome, listener, to another episode of Spam Humbug. This is episode 143 of the podcast. And I dare say we're a little bit more on topic this week, which is not to say that we don't cover a bunch of topics. But like, for example, we start talking about gaming, going from, Ubisoft to Command & Conquer to GTA to World of Warcraft. That's Harmony Dragon and Golem Dragon carrying that particular part of the conversation. And then about the time I'm able to join in the discussion, we kind of move over to talking about like anime and some of the tropes of sort of 80s and 90s anime. We talk about Looney Tunes, sort of that cartoon slapstick violence, 80s cartoons of a more Western nature, Transformers, Thundercats, things like that. Talk about, cultural understandings of a lot of these media and how we sometimes misrepresent or misunderstand the imagery or see it with new eyes as we look at it again as adults. We talk a lot about Star Wars, the old shows, the new shows, The Mandalorian, Dave Filoni versus J.J. Abrams and their approaches to Star Wars, practical effects versus CGI, the evolution of CGI. And then we kind of move back towards gaming. We talk a bit about streamers, histories with streaming. Both Golem and Harmony are avid streamers, and in Golem's case have been doing it for a long time indeed. Talk about music in streams and how this is often the subject of, like spurious copyright claims. And we end up back on the topic of WoW PvP as we end out the episode, but definitely a lot more focused and on topic this week. But there's still a topical smorgasbord if you're looking for that. So just a reminder, of course, we are now hosted on Anchor.fm, a newer and more social podcast hosting platform. You can find us at Anchor.fm/SSSH podcast or at spamhumbug.com, and you can take advantage of some of the neat community features there. You can leave us voice messages. Please consider doing so, or you can give our episodes applause. And if you're listening in the Anchor app, you can favorite our episodes or the podcast itself. If you do the smart home thing, you can also find us live on the Apple HomePod or on Google Home. Try saying, "Hey, smart assistant of your choice, play the podcast Spam Humbug," and see what happens. And as always, this episode of the podcast is brought to you by our Patreon backers, patreon.com/Ultima Codex, if you would like to join their ranks. Thank you to everyone who supports us and the Ultima Codex by that means. And as always, a hearty thank you to our co-producers, Seth, Golden Flame, Chris, Dominic, Violation, Helgriff, Gronk, Pascal, and Thor1. Oh, and hey, also a big shout out to the folks at Geek's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a podcast sponsored by, put on by Wired magazine. They recently interviewed myself to talk about, Ultima and the podcast, and also the Ultima Dragons. That was the main topic, actually, was the Ultima Dragons and sort of the history of the club and how it has maintained and how it has such surprising longevity, even in, now 20, 21 years almost since the last numbered Ultima game was published. So, Geek's Guide to the Galaxy, their episode, which is releasing actually this week. So, this is going to hit Patreon on Thursday. This will hit the general public on Friday. I believe the Geek's Guide episodes publish on Thursdays. So, this week, in addition to checking out Spam Humbug, do check out Geek's Guide to the Galaxy by Wired, because I believe I am the guest in this week's interview that they do. All right, enough from me. Let's get on with the show.
I'm kind of right now on a bit of a boycott of Ubisoft over stuff coming out over some of the practices there.
Oh yeah, what's his face was kicked out. Oh, I forget his name.
Like their chief creative officer, best buddies with Yves Guillemot, or however you pronounce it. Sir Gordon could tell us I'm probably mangling it. The last time I took French, I was 14. That was 29 years ago. And about the only thing I really remember is the word merde.
Let's see. Oh wow, it's not even up on the front page anymore.
Compared to what's gone on with Portalarium, which is depressing.
Oh, their VP, Tommy Francois, was allegedly fired. Sexual harassment. Shocking.
It's almost...
Someone in power sexually harassing someone? Never!
Oh,
You've only seen how many men and women do that? Too many. Their CEO promises sweeping changes. Yep, not gonna happen. Don't care. They're just gonna make claims and nothing's gonna change.
Sergei Haskut or something like that. Oh, no, that's not it, is it? No. That's him. apparently doing things like forcibly kissing lower people on the totem pole, without their consent, sneaking people, quote unquote, magic brownies.
Oh yeah, look at there. HR chief stepped down and managing director of the Canadian studios.
And
Canadian? A Canadian misbehaving? That's even more rare.
did he? Well,
Well, at least with him, you can probably assume he apologized at least.
quite a few of them were let go, and there's all sorts of, it's just outpouring from Ubisoft right now. So I was in the middle of a gameplay through Assassin's Creed Origins when it happened, with plans to do Assassin's Creed Odyssey. The instant I heard about all that going on, even though I owned the games, I just stopped playing and uninstalled both because I didn't want to be having anything to do with Ubisoft stuff.
My best friends did the Odyssey one on stream. That was rather entertaining.
Well, Odyssey, even with the creepy garbage going on, Odyssey was a very good game.
Yeah, it was fun to watch. It's not one I'm going to buy. I'm kind of had the series give me a bad taste in my mouth with the first one, but I'll watch people play them, but that's all I'll do with it. I'm not going to give Ubisoft any big support on that. I might get the new Watch Dogs one, just for the sheer giggle of wanting an army of little old ladies.
That would be amazing. I think they kind of stepped on something, embarrassing when they used the "first they came for the speech" paraphrase that they did. The famous anti-Nazi speech, especially with but we don't need to talk about modern politics. Let's try something less depressing, like the plague. Oh wait, that's modern politics here in the country too.
If we're going to be talking about interesting dev ones, the developers of Fall Guys have been rather interesting in their execution on stuff as of late.
Oh?
So Devolver Digital is working with, I believe it's Mediatronic is the actual developer. And they've now done back-to-back weekends of beta keys. And they have a bunch of us streamers all on like a list. We're now back-to-back Fridays. They have just emailed each streamer 59 keys and just said, here, give them away.
And I'm
I've gotten a total of 118 beta keys that I've just been able to. Some of them, unfortunately, were duplicates because whoever copied and pasted stuff accidentally screwed things up with the mail merge stuff. But still, that's, basically, if I remove the duplicates, that's like 100 keys that I could just give out to anyone on stream, Discord, Twitter. I did all three. People have just been like playing the heck out of it. I think they kind of actually overloaded the servers a little bit at least a couple points.
That might be precisely why they were doing it, to stress test their servers.
But they've just been going ham on marketing. Like, I know Soda Poppin', one of the largest male streamers, he played it on stream and was having a hoot with it. But
I know that name because they used him in the 15 Years of Warcraft video they did.
Oh yeah, he, Asmongold,
Matt Mercer was in it.
I don't think they had S-Fond in it because he was mostly private server stuff.
Well,
But
they
he's
had
another
Matt
one of the large
Mercer,
ones.
they had Ronda Rousey, the guy who played Hodor, and something that made me chuckle, they had the original Leroy Jenkins, doing his Leroy Jenkins shout, which led into a big bar brawl.
I remember that commercial that they had too, which kind of gave that similar silliness. They did, but it should be. It's rather interesting. Like, they did a closed beta with an NDA that I was part of for Fall Guys, and the dev team in the Discord for the private beta was so good. It was like the community manager guy from Underworld Ascendant. They were communicative, they were upfront, they were honest, they admitted, derps at times. Like, it was really, really good. Still a game where maybe you play for 2-3 hours and then you're kind of like, oh, okay, I need a break. But for a party game, they've been surprisingly good as a development studio. With Devolver, I'm not surprised with them as publisher, them executing well on stuff. But for a developer, a small indie one that I've never heard of before, not too shabby.
I've heard the name Devolver Digital before, but I'm trying to remember exactly what I remember them from. Oh, Serious Sam, Nukem.
The reboots of Shadow Warrior, Carrion, I think, was talked about in Discord recently. That's one that is fun. Oh, good lord, they've done so many. Weird West is one I still gotta touch. I'm in another beta. Enter the Gungeon is a popular roguelike one.
They did admit it. I've played that. Oh,
My
one
friend,
game I can't stream, genital jousting.
yeah, my friend Pedro, sort of Ditto, was very popular too for a while.
Oh, they did Carrion. No kidding. I was just
Yep.
watching. I'm trying to remember who I was watching. Oh, right. Chaos D1.
Reigns Her Majesty, I think. Absolver. I'm trying to think through all the other ones.
I was in the beta for Absolver. I like the concept of building your own martial art from a series of different tool moves you get from here and there.
Yeah, I think they were trying to bank off the urge of a lot of fans for a new Jade Empire game, but I don't think it ever quite got as good as they had hoped.
Well, I've heard that it was very good, but I never got that far in it. I never really could figure out the system. And when I did
Yeah,
get into multiplayer, people were just beating the dog snot out of me.
yeah. Oh, Hotline Miami is the other game I'm thinking of that they published.
Oh,
Another
Lord.
one. But no, it's for a battle royale party game with up to 60 people per match that you start off with. Or yeah, 60 people you start off with for each match, and you whittle down with fun little games. And the fact that there's no stupid rewards, there's no stupid battle pass, there's none of that other bullshit.
Oh, and apparently
Rather nice. It's like
neat.
we're not going to be terrible with monetization. We're going to do it right.
Well, speaking of monetization and games that have done it right, EA actually finally gets a pass on something on one game of theirs that I played recently. Jedi Fallen Order.
Yes, they did very good with that game. I'm very proud of them. As publisher, they did good. I would feel dirty saying that, but honestly, they did so good with the game, and it was so popular among streamers and fans of Star Wars in general. I have no real complaints.
I know Ultima fans and BioWare fans love to hate on EA. However, if you were to hear it from Sirgorn, EA was the reason we even have a UO.
It's true. They're the reason we got a couple Ultima games. If they can't accept that fact, well, then they're not living in reality.
The main reason I'm raw for
Honestly, I don't think some of them are living in reality.
True. Well, I know people who are pagan who claim that their form is to follow the 8 virtues of the Avatar. No, really.
We have some special dragons.
Well, I would mention Spoonie, but I feel bad for the man. I've dealt with crippling depression. I still have scars from when I tried to, I ended up out of the army due to a Section 8, if you follow me.
Is it bad that all I can do is think of Klinger when you mention Section 8?
Well, Section 8 is, I think they retired that particular term these days, but it wasn't just a matter of people trying to get out on being LGBT or being.
Oh, I know. There was the list was rather extensive, actually. But I just happen to think of Klinger always because I love the show MASH so much. So
I grew up watching MASH, but then my father was an Army vet, served during NAM, didn't serve in NAM because he was in military intelligence, and they didn't want him in a war zone with what he knew.
Yeah, that happens. Trust me, I'm used to friends and family being military. You just kind of get used to it.
I don't even know where I was going with what I was saying now. Must not
EA,
have been that important.
let's see, we finished the EA monetization, people being too myopic when it comes to EA.
Oh, right. I was going to talk about the reason that I had a lot of vitriol for EA for a very, very long time. There was an MMO I had a hardcore fandom for the longest time, even though I sucked at it and didn't get very far because I kept recreating and recreating and recreating. A big problem I had when I was younger in MMOs. I would get to a certain point, have trouble, decide maybe it's something I built about my character, so I'd recreate the character and go through everything. I would get really good at the first, few days of an MMO, but have problems from there. But this game was Earth and Beyond. It was a space MMO. Eve before Eve was cool, you could say, I suppose.
Yeah, I remember it. Never really played it.
It was by Westwood Studios, also better known for Command and Conquer. Well, after about a year or two, Earth and Beyond got scuttled, even though they still had plans for active development and nearly had 3 new playable ship classes, or character classes, I should say. because your character class determined what ships you piloted. They were in the code, but they never were released because they got shut down by EA because, well, EA wanted more money for The Sims Online.
Yeah. And then it never actually really happened the way they wanted, and we ended up with, what is it, Sims 4? Which, while fun, I just can't bring myself to spend money on expansions.
And that was like the big defining thing of, I believe, each Sims going back was DLC for this, DLC for that, DLC, literal dozens of DLC per version of The Sims.
Yeah, well, I just kind of got used to it. And with 4, I was just kind of like, nah, I got too many other games. I should not going to spend money. That just seems silly. And speaking of Westwood, did you see any of the news or reviews on the Command & Conquer remaster?
I've heard very good things about them.
Good.
But I haven't
The whole little like updating the game type thing to HD that they have at the start was real cool. But like the Destroy All Humans remaster, it's a pretty good, nice, faithful one with a few minor changes, but nothing that, how should I put it, changes the core of the game. So anyone who's played the original will recognize pretty much everything. And
well, that would mean the AI is as cheaty bullshit as it was.
oh, you can still cheese the AI in some ways.
Well, what I mean was that in the original Command and Conquer, the actual resources that the AI used to build units was completely divorced from if they were actually, sending out harvesters and collecting Tiberium. They would just randomly spawn units in their base based on what buildings they had built. And they would never really try to advance their tech. They would take the buildings they had from the start and just rebuild those. Now, one dirty trick I noticed the AI using a lot was right when I was, had infantry units in their base, they would, and nearly destroyed a building, they would sell the building, and anything of mine that was on the tile that was infantry would get killed because of the building demolishing.
I haven't noticed anything too crazy with that. I haven't beaten it yet. I keep being distracted by other stuff, and obviously my health problems kind of threw my monkey wrench in the mix and everything. But
trust me, I understand gamer ADHD. I really, really do. And for my birthday, for example, I was given let's do a laundry list. Dead Cells, which I haven't touched. Code Vein, which I've gotten like maybe 10-20% of the way into. Let's see what else. Pathfinder Kingmaker, which I finished the first chapter out of like 6 or 7. I think there were other things I got. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Oh, right. A friend also got me GTA 5 because they wanted somebody they could trust not to be an idiot during online heist missions. Granted, all I really do is I just walk behind them and grab money and try not to be seen. And they tell me that's more competent than literally 90% of the people they've had with them. Now, I haven't even touched the campaign mode, the storyline. I just run behind them and grab money and try not to be seen. I think I'm level 10 out of 200-300 in the game already just by following them and picking up money.
that is kind of sad. Not gonna lie, it's kind of sad.
And they straight up tell me that my doing that and not being seen is better, has been a better partner for them in doing heists than the people who are much higher level than they are, who are doing things like running or trying to shoot their way through the guards rather than not be seen. Because the way we've been doing things like knocking over casinos and such, for anybody who just popped in, we're talking about a video game here, is to go in and not be seen by guards, or at least make it look like we're supposed to be there until they're searching for whoever stole several million from a bank or a casino. Change our outfits and get out without them noticing that we are who they're looking for. And then get away. Go ahead.
Never really got into the 5th one, so part of me is kind of glad that if people are really that freaking just dumb, never really played it much then.
It's an online game about being criminal, murderer, gang lord, slumlord, psychopaths. So there's going to be people, nursing their id.
Well, I do that too with some games, but still.
You've told me stories about PvP and WoW. I can't argue.
Yeah, or my PvPing and Ultima Online. And...
You know, as the solo paladin in WoW, I have an entirely different, on a PvP server, I have an entirely different view of PvP in classic WoW.
Well, yes, I did all my PKing in WoW as a shaman, so.
That was usually how I knew I was about to die when I was in Ganklethorn. I would be doing my best to stay off the road, because everybody knew if you were on the road in Ganklethorn and you were Alliance, you were about to die. So I had taken it when I was playing to memorizing all these other ways around so I wouldn't get ganked. Oh, I still got ganked. In fact, that was usually my way to know that I was about to die, was seeing Earth Grab pop up on my horse.
Yeah. No, we, as a very avid Horde player, we made sure to let you guys all know who was really in charge.
And the bad part about it was I raged about that for years. It was well known that Horde outnumbered. On my original server back in Vanilla was Storm Scale. We were outnumbered by the Horde by a factor of 3 to 6 to 1. Anytime there was world PvP that happened and we, got a revenge gank on a group for camping somebody, we knew to leave immediately, because if we didn't, that whole zone would be unplayable for hours. And it was all almost entirely one particular guild. And I didn't realize the significance of their name until later when I discovered what it meant, because their name was Anbu.
And for the unenlightened in the audience, what does that mean?
Anbu, the secret police in the village hidden in the leaves in Naruto.
Gotcha.
Just a silly anime reference.
I'm
I'm not a fan of that series, so I tend to kind of mock it. I think the writing's kind of subpar. I think they drag a lot of things out.
Well, it's a shonen anime. It's going to have the classic shonen anime tropes. And I will say that I'm not a fan of it either. And not because of the ganking, just because it was really an anime during a time when anime was either Naruto or the 4Kids dub of One Piece.
Ugh, the English dub of One Piece is still so derpy.
Well, I think Funimation redubbed it and actually used the original music with an English lyric instead of the whole pirate rap they did.
Well, there were certain things they changed too, which kind of irked people.
Well, I know there was one point where a villain was literally threatening to blow an innocent person's head off with a gun, but the dub changed it to him using holding this pistol grip thing that had a spring-loaded hammer over the guy's head.
Actually, that I think was kind of cool. I like that kind of where they change the violence sometimes to something goofy and over the top.
Well, they also censored out a lot of cases of Usopp getting every bone in his body broken. No, literally a scene in the original where they would show every single bone in the guy's body broken.
And that part kind of irks me, because I like that part of like Looney Tunes where it's the overtop with Wile E. Coyote getting hurt.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but that's just too good. You can't get rid of that. Like,
I can't say much because I was a fan of the original Sailor Moon dub back before I knew it was supposed to be crap. Now I can't even watch it subtitled without being painful, because the animation for Sailor Moon was so low quality. Things were off model.
Please, you should look at the old G1 Transformers from back in the day. Like, you have Starscream literally changing colors for a split second at one point and then going back.
Do you know how many hundreds of dollars in 1980s money of Transformers I had as a kid?
Oh, probably as many as me.
Trust me, I know.
As I tell a lot of people, those of us in our generation, we grew up in a really cool time.
Well, admittedly, most of our cartoons, each episode, while they may have had some continuity, each episode was basically, here's the toy to beg your parents for this week.
I still liked the strong bad take on that, right? The cheat commandos, which is obvious G.I. Joe send up, but every time there was like some new vehicle or new weapon that appeared in a cheat commandos episode, it would just put like their little toy company logo, would just go blink right in the corner.
Oh, it's like the first episode of He-Man. I went back and actually watched some Filmation He-Man on YouTube, I believe. They had the whole series up on the official Filmation channel. And the very first episode, they showed them using a vehicle I never remembered them ever using ever since. This Land Raider thing where it had treads, which when they got to the end of the tread would flip over and then they'd keep going. And
Right.
I thought that was the coolest thing, and I realized we never saw that ever again. Oh, toy commercial, right?
Pretty much.
Or like
My-
how? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Kind of accept it.
Oh, I was thinking more in terms of your remark about the animation quality and how, like, my wife was a huge Thundercats fan when she was a little kid. And she went back recently because it was on maybe Netflix or I don't know. She found the original cartoons available for streaming somewhere, and she went back to try to rewatch them, and she couldn't even get through the first episode.
Good old. Oh, was that? Well, was it because of the animation quality, or the fact that people don't seem to remember that Chitara was actually naked in that episode?
Both? I don't know.
Well,
I tried to go back and rewatch Captain Power a few years ago. That was a thing.
oh, the old live action one that had the toy tie-ins where you would try to shoot at the TV.
Yeah.
I had one of those.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then again, I had to stop playing with it because I found out one of my best friends was epileptic.
No.
And that blinking lights from that show did them no good. I just killed the conversation, didn't I?
No. I'm just tired, so I'm not talking nearly as much as I could, but I also tend to not be up this late. But I did take a slight nap to try to help. So
Speaking of Thundercats, that was actually a very, very common practice back in the day, was to spend most of the animation budget on the initial title crawl.
well, you want to get the people sucked in. Once they're sucked in, well, oops.
I mean,
They're just gonna stick around then.
I still remember, just being in awe of the post-movie G.I. Joe opening when I was a kid.
They wind up self-destructing it, but one of the team has to stay behind to actually enact the self-destruct.
Yep.
And he did an interview some years later where he was like, yeah, basically that whole scene was like me talking through again in my head this conversation I had with a friend who I tried and failed to stop from killing themselves over the phone.
Ooh.
It's like, wow, and that made it into a kid's show. Okay. Welcome to the 80s. I guess that might have been the early 90s, late 80s.
Well,
I don't know. I'd have to look it up again.
And I rest my case. We grew up in an interesting era.
Again,
You did.
nobody, you would not see Thundercats these days, at least not the original episode as they did it in the 80s these days. If only because people would actually realize, oh yeah, that woman's naked. But a lot of times you really can't, quote unquote, go there in shows these days without somebody complaining, hey, that's too political. Take Avatar Legend of Korra. A reasonably good takeoff or spin-off series to the original Avatar. Most people I know who watched it really heavily enjoyed it. However, there was a very controversial final scene. Well, controversial to a lot of people, not to me, but they showed the main character, Korra, and one of her sidekicks, Asami, holding hands as they went into the light.
Now, see, that's something where even amongst, I hate to use this as the excuse, very conservative people that, because of where I live and those around me, but a lot of them are like, oh, it's just two girls holding hands. Big whoop. It's pretty normal.
I mean, now the after comics, because they did his comic series after the fact, made it very heavily explicit. Yeah, they were a couple, and they faced prejudice over it. But
I look at it this way: culturally, this is not something that is really all that unusual, and why any people made a fuss about it was more, I think, them overreading into it.
well, given that these
Obviously, their thoughts of, well, they're forcing it to be, this part, the fact that they became a couple and whatnot, and it's like, well, you can read into something so many different ways. It's like the ending to a lot of different shows where it's like you can read into it in pretty much any way you want, but it's one of those where it's like it's rather wholesome because it's just kind of a normal thing in a lot of cultures, and I think a lot of people forget sometimes just how normal that is, especially with Eastern cultures, which, guess what, that whole series is fairly inspired by.
I remember, I don't actually remember who this was. Someone either in my family or like in sort of my family's close circles, either like an actual uncle or a person who I basically knew as an uncle, but was really like my dad's drinking buddy from back in the day or something like that.
I've known a few people who had uncles of that nature and aunts.
I have a whole cohort of family that is broadly speaking in that category. Actually, like I was, even like, there's just today, I got a birthday notification for someone on Facebook who mentally, she is my cousin, right?
Yes.
I know her as my cousin. She is my cousin, as far as, my mind is concerned. We're not related at all. She is the daughter of one of my dad's friends. But I would still feel, I have never entertained any romantic thoughts towards her, and I would feel utterly dirty actually asking her out.
You're talking about the Westermark effect there. You've probably known her since you were both kids.
Yeah, pretty much. We were, just about in diapers together, basically. So
Yeah,
only a
I
couple
had
years
a
between us.
relationship like that with one girl that I ended up going to high school and college with. Like, we've known each other since we were babies, since we were less than a year old.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
got lots of
always
people like that.
that kind of relationship where it's just like, people are like, why don't you ask her out? You get along so well. You have all these, like, ew.
Like, ew,
No.
gross. She's like my cousin, dude. Like, seriously.
It's just,
Yeah.
no. It's like,
Well,
my parents are best friends almost.
I
with her
will
parents.
point out that I grew up in Missouri and live in Florida. I know people where that wouldn't really be a factor, and I'll leave it there.
Right. But anyways, shit. Where was I going with this? I had a point. It's gone. Too much whiskey already. What were we
I
talking
miss
about before this?
alcohol. I
What were we
miss
talking about before
alcohol
this?
so much. I can't drink.
Politicizing social or people complaining that
Oh, right. Yes. So, anyways, it was either like an actual uncle or a pseudo uncle. I can't remember which. But this was so the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, was running a commercial for Air Canada. And Air Canada had put together this commercial that basically, showed a bunch of people from around the world greeting each other, right? Just lots of just a whole series of vignettes of just happy greetings. And I remember this person being utterly incensed at the fact that it showed that the commercial deigned to show one dude kissing another dude on the cheek. Of course, it was very obvious that they were like in France or Italy, one of the two. But a culture where enough, just a affectionate kiss between people is considered a normative form of greeting, regardless of whether it's men or women or whoever.
Exactly.
So yeah, I remember that quite vividly, that this person, whoever they were, just being incensed at, and I'm watching this on the screen and I'm just like, pretty sure that's normal in wherever they are.
I think there's just a lack of people trying to understand some of these other cultures. It's a little sad because that's one of the most fascinating things I find with watching, like, especially K-dramas and anime and a lot of other stuff, is you just see certain things where it's like, interesting. And you just kind of pick up on little things where it's like, yep, they're just so different in handling certain things out there than it is here.
and I
love it.
I would agree with you, but to where I was trying to go with it, as I was trying to steer around to this one show that I was a little bit of a fan of, and my fiance ended up going full hog on. It was She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, the recent remake of She-Ra. Now, a lot of people, before it came out, were hating on the character designs for the fact that rather than all basically being, Barbie doll Xeroxes, the characters were wearing, had somewhat more realistic body proportions, like the male or like the main character, being the warrior that she was a bit stocky, like somebody who had been weight training and training to fight would be. And rather than having the classic Wonder Woman skirt, had bike shorts on under it. And that people were offended by this, that she didn't look model hot like the original series. Then they started getting into queer themes in the show, and people started losing their minds completely. And the funny part about it to me was, so many people were saying I was a fan of the original show, and this is nothing like the original show. Yet IMDb, took ratings from people, and more tellingly, did ratings of people based on the identifying gender of the people giving their review. And almost overwhelmingly, the people who were downvoting it were men or were male. I remember living a boy's childhood when I was in the 80s. I remember that no kid, no boy, quote unquote, wanted to be, have anybody get the idea that they were even the remotest bit interested in something as girly as She-Ra.
What? No, hell no. You didn't watch She-Ra. What do you want to do? Get beat up on the slide? Like, come on.
Exactly. So it was rather telling that the people who were complaining the loudest probably never watched the original show.
Or they went back and binged it after the fact. But, I mean, God, you find this in everything, though, right? Like Star Wars, Star Trek. How well received has Star Trek Discovery been? I mean, generally it has been very well received.
Writing
but
ended up being
yeah,
rather good.
Received a lot better than Star Trek Lower Decks, that's for sure.
I haven't checked. Well, that doesn't launch here until the 6th. So my wife gets a birthday present.
No.
But big Trekkie.
You're talking to someone who on a weekly RP game plays a Tal Shiar Romulan agent posing as a Vulcan chief science or chief medical officer on a Federation starship.
Nice. So, I mean, yeah, like, but then again, too, like there was, I'm pretty sure the initial reaction to the Clone Wars cartoon was probably not warm. I did not follow the Star Wars community closely enough to notice. But if I had to just wager a guess, I'm pretty sure the Clone Wars cartoon was not well received when it initially launched. Pity, because it's, like some of the best Star Wars that Star Wars has to offer. But I'll bet you that there were people just bitching about that until all hours of the evening.
Oh, there were people were complaining about the fact they didn't get Ewan McGregor, that they didn't get Ian. I'm trying to remember his name, Ian McDermott, to play Palpatine. People were complaining about the fact they didn't get Sir Christopher Lee to play Count Dooku. People were complaining about this, that, and the other. However, it's been a Star Wars tradition to not get those people for animated spin-offs or for video game adaptations for decades.
Yeah,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just gonna, that's like, has that ever happened? I mean, maybe a little bit, but barely.
Right, if you go back and play Star Wars TIE Fighter, Star Wars X-Wing, or Dark Forces, Vader is never voiced by James Earl Jones. Leia,
because
go ahead.
No one's gonna pay James Earl Jones's, speaking fees because he's James Earl Jones when they're developing a computer game. Nobody's gonna do that.
Exactly. Now, people complained about that, and we're going on, well, this is different these days, when it really wasn't. People were complaining about Ahsoka Tano. I was one of the ones complaining the loudest because I thought she went against everything that defined the Jedi. Then I, grew up and realized that, that's maybe because the Jedi needed, somebody to stand in relief of what they're doing wrong, or what they were doing wrong in the series.
And no offense to Rey, but Ahsoka is far and away the best female character in the Star Wars lexicon. You know what? I think I like Ahsoka more than Leia. Leia's great too. But I mean, like, Ahsoka Tano is just that is an amazing character.
Yeah, well, Leia was in a slave girl bikini when I hit puberty, so.
Okay, you've got me there.
If we're gonna be honest about things, and I would say Natalie Portman did a fine job. I would argue that her Amidala was better than Rian Johnson's Rey. I think it was Rian Johnson. I can't remember the actress's name.
No, Rian Johnson was the director of The Last Jedi. Daisy Ridley is the actress who played Rey.
My bad. And I wouldn't say that Daisy Ridley wasn't a bad actress. Granted, they kind of had a problem where different directors had different views and goals for the movies. With Last Jedi versus Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, and they weren't as good as they could have been, but they were still Star Wars.
Yeah, they're all eminently watchable as such. And I can't get my daughters to watch a single damn one of them, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, nobody's perfect. And I will say this, and this is a very controversial tack to take, but people don't realize that when we were watching the original trilogy, we were children. People don't realize that a lot of the various fans of the prequel trilogy were children when they came out.
Yeah.
When you think about it, with the marketing especially, And in many cases, and especially with, say, the Ewoks, with Jar Jar, with Gungans in general, with the Porgs, etc., the Star Wars movies were essentially marketed to the children of their time.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I guess you could maybe make the argument that, like the first Star Wars movie, the first Star Wars movie, New Hope, was maybe more marketed at like teens, right? Like it's basically, it's a typical late 70s teenage angst drama.
Right, which had very deep roots in both Japanese Jidaigeki style, Akira Kurosawa flicks,
Mm-hmm.
as
And also
well.
Westerns and
Well,
Flash Gordon.
right.
And that's where the space comes from, I guess. But
Well, the whole title crawl was classic for your 1940 serials. At least I would think it is. So if we're going to talk about Star Wars, there's a couple of very amazingly well done bits of fiction and content that were put out back in the 70s for Star Wars that really while they're non-canon, laid a lot of groundwork. People don't like to accept it, but if it wasn't for the Star Wars Holiday Special, we wouldn't have had Boba Fett.
that is true.
There is also something that was done with the Star Wars characters in another series, a very, very short-lived, canceled after 4-episode series, the Richard Pryor Show. Actually got licensed from 20th Century Fox, from Lucasfilm, to use music from Star Wars, by their in-house band, mind you, not the original recordings.
Right.
And the actual alien suits from the Mos Eisley Cantina. And Richard Pryor on his show did this Star Wars bar skit where he was tending bar to various aliens from the, doing his standard comedy. And it was very funny and very well done, though admittedly, because it was a product of the 70s, it was a little off color. There's words used that you would never hear on TV these days.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember watching, some Eddie Murphy comedy special at some friend's birthday party or other. We shouldn't have been watching it. We were way too young as an audience for the Eddie Murphy comedy special.
No kidding
But
to that.
you probably know exactly which one I'm talking about, too.
Yeah.
Man, those leather pants. Oh, my gosh. But yes, I take your point. Like the late 70s and early 80s comedy that was the thing. That was a phenomenon.
I can't say much because this was like a patron word for Richard Pryor, but he did utter the N-word when talking about one of the aliens. But that's a different story.
But that's Richard Pryor too. So
that was just him and how he did things.
That's probably part of why his show was canceled after 4 episodes.
Well, yeah. I on the subject though of the Cantina Band, I did enjoy the episode in The Mandalorian where they end up in the same cantina. I was geeking out so hard. I did not even expect that I would be. But then they walk in and I'm just like, it's the thing with the thing, but that is a robot bartender. And it was great. I was a little mad there wasn't a burn mark on the wall, but whatever. I'm sure they would have painted over it.
Yeah,
I'm sure they would have painted over it. Still,
what barkeep's going to leave that kind of damage around in his establishment?
Yeah, but yes, that's been an enjoyable series so far.
Yeah, I haven't actually watched The Mandalorian. Literally everybody and his dog have been telling me I need to.
Well, I mean, the thing about The Mandalorian is that Dave Filoni needs to be the guy who is in charge of Star Wars. Like, he is. I mean, this is the man who was hand-selected by George Lucas, right? He is the Obi-Wan to Lucas's Qui-Gon. And
so that means he's going to take Anakin under his belt and completely fail to teach him properly?
Well, yeah, I get. Actually, there's been some absolutely fascinating stuff written about. Well, and really that wasn't, well, yeah, okay, I guess. But yeah, maybe he wouldn't be able to hand on the Star Wars tradition to anybody else. But the tradition that's been handed on to him, like to hear him talk about Star Wars, like he really is, he gets the series, I think, at a level that most of us can only aspire to. And you really see that it's just infused into every little aspect of the Mandalorian. You know, it's interesting that it has come out alongside this sequel trilogy because, you know, and again, like I don't want to assure anybody in the audience, I'm not trying to frame that in a way where it's like sequel trilogy bad, Mandalorian good, but there are very, you know, sort of, they are different approaches to Star Wars, and I like how the Mandalorian does it somewhat better. You know, you can tell in watching the sequel trilogy, especially the J.J. Abrams directed components of the sequel trilogy. There is great love for Star Wars there, but it's the sort of like it's a kind of love that almost borders on, you know, like a reverence, and there's very little desire to innovate with the object of reverence,
Oh
Well,
God, we see that too much with certain things at times.
right?
I would go into plot elements of what happened in the third movie, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody.
Well, hopefully enough people know what happens in ROTS by now. But yeah, I take your point. But like, you know, like he wants to tell a Star Wars story, but he doesn't want to make any sort of steps that, you know, depart from the tableau, I guess maybe is the word I'm looking for here, of the original trilogy. You know, like it's just he's really, he can't get out of that mentality all
Who,
that much.
Filoni?
Hmm?
Oh, you're meaning Dave Filoni? Or you
No,
mean
no, 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 no. Like Abrams and Johnson to a degree. Like Johnson was at least willing to experiment. We can argue about the degree to which he succeeded or didn't, but he was willing to experiment. But Abrams, especially, like, you know, he obviously reverences the original trilogy, and he's really doesn't seem to want to do much to deviate from it or innovate around it. Filoni, on the other hand, Filoni has a deep and abiding respect for Star Wars, and you can tell that. It is infused into everything that he produces. But Filoni is able to channel that respect into innovation, you know? And you see that with the Clone Wars, you see that with Rebels, you see that with Resistance, which he didn't do directly, but like he had a hand in, and you see it now in The Mandalorian. He is able to he's able to tell new Star Wars stories, but keep this core of Star Wars in them. You know, the stories he tells are they are fundamentally Star Wars, and you can tell that like the core of the series is present in all of the stuff that he does, but he's willing to go to new places and try new things and just innovate. It's fascinating to compare and contrast the two. You know, Abrams is very much, he's painting by the numbers, whereas Filoni is taking the work of a great master and bringing something new to it that nevertheless respects the master.
Well, if we're going to talk about, good things that he's done, one thing that I personally thought was a very nice homage to, again, Akira Kurosawa, whose work we know was a heavy basis for the original Star Wars.
Right.
Was one episode of Star Wars Rebels where the crew of the ship I believe it was called the Ghost, was the ship in that series.
Yeah, the Ghost. It also appears in Rogue One and in The Rise of Skywalker.
Right. Well, they had them basically playing out the Magnificent 7/7 Samurai plot of them trying to help protect while training up a village of locals against a marauding group of bandits.
Right.
And they even referenced, even mentioned Kurosawa directly at the beginning, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, whether it was a character or a ship name or something, I
I
can't remember exactly, but
I think in the actual opening credits they mentioned Kurosawa's
oh,
name.
maybe. I'd have to go back and look. I haven't finished Rebels yet. Shame, Ken.
Oh, for the longest time,
Rebels ended well. They handled Rebels well. Not, I think Mandalorian, from what I hear from all the friends of mine that have seen all of both, they all prefer Mandalorian, but just a little bit.
Well, Ahsoka Tano is going to show up in season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like those two
Rosario Dawson is
combined-
playing her, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, those two combined have really done a lot. like, I think in some ways they've kind of overtaken the newest trilogy movies and just kind of kicked them to the curb. It's like, no, we're just going to do it better. And we're going to do
Well,
it
and
animated, and we're going to just.
I was reading something, I can't remember where, but somewhere was pointing out that, well, it was two things. The article pointed out two things. One, Lucas had actually had the idea of, like, because what they're doing with the Mandalorian, and it's cool tech they're using for the Mandalorian, right? Like, I mean, if you think about how they shoot the jump to hyperspace, right? It's a mock-up of the cockpit in front of a really big-ass screen at Pinewood Studios. And they play out the hyperspace animation on the screen, right? And, especially with like Rogue One, they really have some fun with that because, of course, in every other Star Wars movie, basically the jump to hyperspace is what's in focus. Whereas in Rogue One, it's kind of this blurry out of focus thing happening in the background. So they have some fun with it. But, they basically took, like, Lucas had the idea to basically take that and set up screens that would serve as the backdrops, and they would basically, play out the backdrop of a scene in real time as the actors were acting it out. Now, at the time, they didn't have all of the tech in place to be able to do that and make it look good. But we do now with The Mandalorian, right? They do now. And they do that, right? Most of the scenes in The Mandalorian are shot in front of a big LCD screen, and it's kind of this surrounding LCD screen. And they render most of the scenery in real time using Unreal Engine, using a game engine, so that the actors are, and it lets them do two things. One, it gives them a backdrop while they're filming, so the actors can literally see what we, the audience, would also be seeing, and they can react to it accordingly. But also, it lights correctly, just automatically. And I think I was reading somewhere that, like about 80% of the footage they shoot is basically ready, just without much additional post-production.
Really
which is
optimize their just method, and it's
right.
just, it blows my mind sometimes.
What's
the
really
more we
cool,
see how this happens compared to, like, say, the 80s cartoons.
yeah, and what's really cool is that, like, this was a fascinating thing they were doing with The Mandalorian. Of course, Jon Favreau was kind of spearheading it as well. But now in the post-COVID reality, now all of a sudden a lot of other studios are knocking on Jon Favreau's door virtually and saying, so how do you do that exactly? Because, like, it basically, like, because of, like, distancing requirements and whatever else, they can't necessarily shoot movies as they have traditionally done. So technology, like is being used to film The Mandalorian, is really going to become, or could stand to become, the go-to tech for shooting films for the foreseeable future, because it allows for, I mean, it's less people intensive to begin with, but it also, of course, allows them to basically present the same scene to different actors who may not even be physically in the same location, and have them act out their parts, and then they can just stitch it all together.
Well, that's one thing that actually was a very big selling point for The Force Awakens, now that I remember it, was they made a point of talking about how much of the filming, especially the droids, BB-8 specifically, were all going to be
practical
done.
effects. Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but I found the Yoda Muppet from Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi to me to feel more lifelike and realistic than the CGI.
Well, sure, but I mean, at the same time, you don't get like, think of something like Jon Favreau, like Favreau's Jungle Book, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if you've seen that, but that is an amazing movie, right?
Isn't that the one where all the animals are CGI?
Literally the only thing real on the screen is the kid. And yeah, like, it is utterly amazing, but you don't get to that without coming through. Well, I mean, arguably you don't get to that without first starting at The Last Starfighter, right?
Hey,
you don't
when I
get
was a kid, that movie was amazing.
It's still amazing, but it's definitely not, the graphics definitely lack a certain, shall we say, realism to them. But you know what? You don't get to even, the incredible CGI that is definitely on display in the sequel trilogy, right? And they do use a lot of practical effects too, but they use a hell of a lot of CGI, and
Oh,
it
no
looks
doubt.
incredible, right? You don't get to that without the unfortunately somewhat awkward intermediary stage that is CGI Yoda battling it out with Count Dooku.
Well, to be fair, we had an even earlier intermediary stage, which was kind of painful. Was the very jank edits from the deleted scene that was reinserted back in for the special editions of Star Wars. And there were multiple versions of the special edition, and I'm not just talking about the various versions of Han or Greedo shooting first or McClunky.
You're talking about Jabba at the Falcon.
Right. They had two different versions of Jabba that I know of, and even in the final most updated release that I've seen, it was very obviously him walking was very obviously quick, cropped up, cropped down when stepping over the tail. It wasn't it didn't look natural at all.
No, and that's, and again, that's just, it's kind of one of the, but I mean, it's the same thing with 3D games, right? You don't have The Last of Us 2 without coming through the blocky nightmare that is Quake.
I would also mention that I played a lot of online Quake back in the day, so I know where you're coming from.
And it's just it's kind of, it's the burden we bear as being old enough to have lived through all of those times and to have seen how this technology has emerged. On the one hand, we get to marvel at it in wonder and reflect back to a time like when we were watching Transformers cartoons in the 80s, where seeing giant metal robots duking it out on screen in the stunning realistic detail that they can be seen in whatever the latest Michael Bay monstrosity is, we would never have dreamed that possible. Yet there it is before us. And so in one sense, we can marvel at it in wonder at the fact that, holy crap, that's amazing. And then on the other hand, we had to live through literally every attempt at 3D CGI in cinema prior thereto. Sometimes with great success, sometimes with not so much success. I really enjoyed watching Lost in Space when it first came out. Not because it's a good movie, but because the CGI was pretty eye-popping at the time. Going back and rewatching it now, I can definitely tell you that it's CGI.
Well, yeah, it was like in college when Spirits Within, that Final Fantasy one came out. That was a marvel of technology just for that level of CGI.
And it was very realistic for the time. You're right. I mean,
Yes. You look at it now, and it's now it's definitely aged, but
yeah, it hasn't aged as well as you might have hoped, but there it is. Or should we mention the Scorpion King?
God.
Well, a lot of the difference also is back in the day we were watching things on standard def monitors, either 14-inch standard def CRT monitors on our desktop or on 20-inch TVs. We weren't watching things in 1080p or 4K or going out to IMAX and watching things at super high frame rate.
Yes, the advent of HD has laid bare many of the inadequacies of early CGI.
And early special effects, which looked real on standard def, looked, eye-poppingly beautiful in standard def, but kind of not so much the same.
No. And I mean, that's sort of an unfortunate thing because people build for the medium, right? And that's true in computer games too. You build for the tech that's available at the time, or if you're Origin, you build for the tech that's available about 2 months after you launch. But still, right? And unfortunately, for those of us who lived through those times, it's eye-popping at the time, and we remember it as such. But then, like my wife revisiting Thundercats in the cold light of day 20 years later, okay, I can see where this has issues.
Like I was saying to Golem earlier, one of my very first anime fandoms was the original Canadian deep dub of Sailor Moon.
Mm-mm.
This was back when I was learning what anime was. Well, that and the old ocean dub of Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
90s.
Well, and Gundam Wing. But anyway,
Hmm.
these days, or recently, I went back to go watch the Funimation redub, in far more accurate English rather than them basically tossing out the script and making up whatever.
Right.
And while it was true to the original subs I had watched back when I was earlier, it was also just as off model as I ever remembered it being. It was also so very basically poorly animated early on.
We'll always have the
Yeah.
nostalgia, but it's one of those things where it's fun to go back once, and then it's like, yep, okay, I've had my nostalgia. I'm gonna go focus back on the new stuff.
And ironically, fans of the original of that original anime, when Crystal came out, couldn't stand Crystal, which ironically was more accurate to the original manga, because this isn't Sailor Moon. They're all noodly armed.
Yeah, but Crystal was actually so well done that a lot of us, while hesitant going into it, ended up going, you know what, this is great. And that's because they held to they treated the original work with the right kind of reverence. We learned that we were able to jump onto it. Some of these where they remake things or they do a reboot or a sequel with a new art style or things like that, there are times where they just do not have that reverence for the original work. And then you can tell their motivation behind it is actually political or financial or whatever. And it's just like, ugh.
Admittedly, one of the other complaints about Crystal was they made too many changes to the story. I'm thinking, no, they went back to being closer to the original. The people complaining about the story changes don't remember back when we had three different universes, timelines for Tenchi Muyo, and each of them were considered equally canon. The Tenchi Muyo OAVs, Tenchi Universe, and Tenchi in Tokyo. And that's
remember.
pretty Sammy.
Once you start getting into multiple timelines and multiverse type stuff, you tend to start to lose a lot of people, and they tend to start to get kind of annoyed because they have a tough time keeping it straight.
Well, to be fair, Tenchi also got a little bit weird in all the various different things that it got into. But that was also one of the needless censorship things I wanted to point out back when we were talking about, 90s and pointless censorship and stuff in anime. There were quite a lot of bathhouse scenes, furo scenes.
No, we still deal with censorship. I mean, Sony censors a lot of games too that they want on their platform, especially a lot of games from Japan.
Well,
You just to kind of pick and choose your battles.
It's their right to do, and it's people's right not to buy it not to buy that platform if they don't want to.
Case in point, some of us games on there just simply don't exist. We have that one new game on PlayStation that crushed. What is it? The Last of Us 2? What was it? Ghosts of
Tsushima.
But the game doesn't exist because they're not going to do a PC port of it, so I'll never get a chance to play it.
You sound like who was the dragon? I can't remember whether it was
Umbre is the Mr. PlayStation doesn't exist.
Oh,
I love that quote. But I'm having so much fun watching friends play Ghosts of Tsushima because it is so pretty and it reminds me so much of Sekiro, which did get a PC port.
A lot of my friends are calling it Ghosts of Red Dead Redemption.
Oh, it's so much better than Red Dead Redemption. They freaking put Rockstar to shame with some of the stuff that they've done.
Well, as long as they have more solid netcode, because some of the problems I've had connecting to GTA Online, my God.
Well, I look at it this way. Rockstar's gotten lazy. And we've seen what developers do when they get lazy. We mentioned EA earlier. Look at what they do with all their sports games. It's literally the exact same game, but you're just paying for the new roster, but you're paying full price, and you get all the stupid monetization crap.
Oh, the monetization is where they put in a lot of effort. Like, do you remember the whole games as service surprise mechanics kerfluffle?
Oh yeah, and then didn't they have one game from one developer where it's literally a casino theme with a slot machine and whatnot?
That's their.
And it's like, it's not gambling.
That was their NBA. Oh, that was NBA 2K20. That's actually, I don't know. That's 2K Games. That wasn't EA.
That was an EA. It was one of those ones, but it's still just so tough.
No, well, also
EA is just as bad though with their monetization. It's just the way it is.
It's
fair. How much do you have to innovate on soccer. Last I checked, the rules don't change
Or
that much year
football
over
or
year.
other ones. Really, what they should do is they should just be like, hey, here's the base game, and then we'll have it span out for years, like almost kind of like what Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering Arena is, and just have cheap little DLC for the new rosters. There, problem
Well,
solved.
Of course,
why
that
do
cheap little DLC would have to occasionally incorporate engine advancements, which aren't so cheap.
Do they
why
really need to though for the span of like 2-3 years?
Well,
thing, though.
no, practically, and yes, because gamers.
Why put out a $10-$20 season pass DLC every year for a roster update when they know people are going to pay $60 for the full price game, and then go ahead and pay for loot boxes to unlock their favorite players? I mean, they do it that way because they know people will pay for it that way.
Welcome to why I think so little of mankind.
Yeah, yeah, we hate you, but give us more.
It surprises me. It shocks me to the core that of all the people doing, pulling all the skeevy stuff they're one of the most decent, they still got their skeletons in the closet, sure. But one of the most decent groups is Microsoft. For everybody watching, this is our weekly shilling for Game Pass time.
Sure. Okay, Microsoft, though, in all honesty, for like the past decade, have been on a rise of improvements. Doing, so much more,
Yeah.
not just on the programming end of things with, .NET and other stuff, but also on the gaming end too. Like they've just, I mean, good grief, we still have the whole Connect API being made, open for developers to do stuff for disabled people or handicapped, whatever term you want to go with.
I love the smart
much.
download program they're incorporating into the Series X with the no matter what version you buy, you can always download the best version for whatever system you've got.
Like Microsoft, whoever they've been putting in charge of different divisions over the last decade, they're getting the right people with the right mindset and just overall been going on the right track. And
I
it could even
remember
be 15 years, maybe even at this point. Like it's crazy.
I remember the days back in the late 1990s when we were, the same thing that again, getting kind of political, that people have done for the last 10 years for name president here, posting pictures of Bill Gates a face superimposed on Hitler's body, complaining that they were being very, very, we are Microsoft aboard, resistance is futile, etc.
Well, that was Slashdot, right? Like I think Slashdot still uses the Borg icon whenever they have a Microsoft-related article.
But Microsoft's been on a good track, and it's just nice to see them kind of do that. Although it did kind of make me chuckle with the whole recent TikTok silliness.
Oh, I thought didn't you hear
that Microsoft was brought up.
Didn't you hear TikTok was banned in the US these days?
Actually, no, he did not sign the ban. What is happening is they're encouraging the whole US company buying it, which there's a lot of interest for it because obviously there's a lot of money being made. So, like Microsoft has an interest. They've admitted it publicly. There's some other companies. And somehow they think that this will somehow mean that there'll be less issue with people's information being taken. It's like, no. Hello, Facebook.
As much as I dislike Jeff Bezos, I would love to see Amazon buy TikTok, if only because that would make so many people who are, who have fallen on the political, Amazon's evil bandwagon just freak the hell out.
Yeah, that would be more than a little amusing.
Because
moment.
I'll be honest, I am very much an old school lefty, and who has been very much, for years publicly bashing Jeff Bezos on Twitter?
Me?
The president.
But also Golem. But yes, the president.
Now, I can't
I've
say...
mocked him a couple of times. Really good, actually.
I won't say too much because I'm a Twitch streamer and Twitch is owned by Amazon. So technically, I don't want to say something too negative about the guy who could basically point at my account and say, piff.
Oh, well, I'll say this.
Go
Jeff,
on.
My Twitch account is still got a spree instead of my Golden Dragon brand. And yeah, I still think you need to do a lot of big changes over there because you suck and still refuse to do anything to help.
So technically, I'm on severe hiatus right now because my number one fan is currently in the hospital. I mean, she's getting better, but it's still going to be a while.
Well, I mean, that is a better prognosis than, some of the alternatives.
This is true.
No, my big problem with Twitch at the moment is their monetization. And this is the reason why. They're not a profitable company. They could be, but the people in charge of their marketing and sales department keep selling the CPM at such a high rate that the problem is they can't sell enough ads. So we get these repeats of like the same ad just a million times.
Well, you might. I have ad blocker.
Adguard.
But like they really could be doing so much more with the company and being able to make money to then develop things to fix a lot of these other problems. But that would require the right person getting involved. And that's just seemingly with Jeff never going to happen.
Well,
I think he's a little bit hands off with it, which doesn't surprise me.
Well, I mean, let's face it, when you're running a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate with so many different departments, like, I mean, come on,
Well, okay, I look at it this way. They have, obviously, we have the Amazon Web Services. That's their big, huge moneymaker. We got Prime, which is their other huge moneymaker to go with the whole store stuff.
well,
They're basically subsidizing Twitch already at that point, but it's just like you could improve things and get so much more in there, and that would, also help the whole gaming industry at the same time get into a better place.
Oh, speaking of nonsensical Twitch-related things, I will preface this by saying I'm not a fan of the gentleman. I'm just curious as to what the crap happened. Have either of you heard of a person called Dr. Disrespect?
Yes.
come across.
Well,
The fact he's still in the news is funny too.
Formerly major big time Twitch streamer, literally like less than a couple of weeks after signing like I think it was either a 7-figure or an 8-figure exclusivity deal with Twitch, was promptly banned off the service and his account deleted. And to this day, nobody outside of the doing knows why. Multiple times he's even said, "I don't know why they banned me. I have no clue."
But at the same time, I still kind of question a little bit that it could be that he just can't say, or they gave him a very generic reason why, and they're just not going into specifics for
And
legal reasons, and so maybe he doesn't want to pry because of legal reasons.
I know people have contacted Twitch, and the official line is, "We don't talk about cases like this."
Oh yeah, then that's been their standard even before Amazon bought them. They broke it a few times, but that's always been their standard answer.
Oh,
And that's
granted,
important because you have to, from a legal standpoint, do that. That's the way I've handled a lot of stuff with the legal cases, all 3 of them that I was dealing with. What was it? A month or 2 ago? That was always my answer. Or last year when I had a certain incident happen with a pretty high profile person, anytime people in the business community around here ask questions about what happened, I'll let my lawyer deal with it. And it was always a very generic, bland non-answer, but you got to do that.
it absolutely wasn't the first time Twitch has broken their rules. You're right. I remember the whole kerfluffle that what happened when Ninja jumped ship for Mixer. Was rather than just close his account like they normally do when somebody officially leaves, they started using his channel because they knew it would be getting clicks to it because he was one of the top 10.
And that's not even their typical method. Like Melanie Mack left for, what was it, Facebook Gaming? Her account was still up on Twitch. All they did was just removed her monetization. That was it.
Well,
They left it up and everything. No, she unfortunately is one of those where she's a sweetheart. She always treats people with respect, even if you disagree with her. Ninja can be a real ass.
you won't hear me arguing. But they basically used his channel and were using it to show ads for other Twitch streamers. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's kind of below the belt.
It's a bit of dirty pool, definitely.
I think it comes down to someone over there didn't like the guy because he's an ass, and that's why they did it.
Well, you won't hear me arguing. I have my own issues with him over a case from a couple of years ago when he stuck up for a Fortnite streamer who was openly aimbotting during a stream, which is, very against the rules. And, and Epic banned him, and he's like, the rules should be different for us because we're influencers. We bring people to the game. I'm thinking, yeah, and letting something like that slide for a big person is going to let the small fries think that it's okay for them to be shitbags too.
I don't think we're ever going to get an answer why Dr. Disrespect was banned, but
apparently he's put some video out talking about coming back, but I don't think it's going to be to Twitch.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it'll be YouTube, and YouTube's got a bigger market share anyways than Twitch, and it has a higher likelihood of him growing to a even larger size than what he was, so
you're not wrong. However, YouTube has its own problems with how hardcore they are about, oh, you're doing something with guns, demonetized. Oh, you mentioned the F word, demonetized. Oh, you're talking about religion, demonetized.
Yes,
Oh,
but remember, he's a streamer. The majority of his stuff is going to be the join button. It's going to be things like super chat and other stuff like that. It's
I
not
don't
going to
even know what the
be.
join button is in YouTube these days.
It's basically like a Twitch sub, only it's instead of tiered system, it's just one flat cost. You still get access to emotes that are custom ones and all that. It's YouTube's version of the Twitch sub button.
Well, I'm still, how to say, I jumped ship from YouTube after the whole what's it called, the original Adpocalypse.
Well, I went from a personal site to a third-party site to another third-party site to Justin TV to Twitch, back to YouTube, then not streaming, then back to Twitch. I have bounced all over in, oh good lord, almost 18 years of streaming at this point, and it's ridiculous
But
how many
YouTube,
problems each site has.
right? YouTube, when I originally signed up to, be monetized on YouTube, it was a matter of no matter how small you are, if people are watching ads on your channel, you're going to get a little bit of revenue. It's pennies.
Yeah,
The idea. Don't know if it works in the execution.
Then, they started
ditched that.
changing things, and then they started moving the goalposts and moving the goalposts. And now, if you don't have at least 10,000 views, and if you don't have at least so many people, subscribing and watching you, so many hours viewed per, so however, I don't even think about trying to monetize. And here's this you can't monetize, this you can't monetize, and if somebody claims you, they get your money until you contest it. No questions. And here's the thing. I've had videos because I streamed on YouTube for about a year before I went to Twitch. Mostly, I went through the Mass Effect series. I went through Fallout 4. I went through Skyrim. At least every month on one of my 3-4-year-old VODs, I get a copyright flag because of music. Here's the thing is, I didn't play any outside of game music. It was, Mass Effect 2, I got claimed for a song from Mass Effect 2.
Yes, but that's because the bots on YouTube have been there longer and they understand YouTube better than they do Twitch. And so in the case of a lot of games, I'm going to use Life is Strange as a good example. Life is Strange's soundtrack, they license the song to use it, but they don't own the rights to it, and that's why a lot of those songs are always caught. And it's the same with a lot of other games. It's because of license issues.
Well, the problem with Skyrim was they specifically, Bethesda specifically said, we give you the rights to stream anything from this game as long as the music is ours. As long as this, I actually got, and said you have rights to stream any music that's from the game, in the game. You have the rights to stream any content from the game as long as you're not doing anything illegal with it. This was their policy at the time. And I still, not long ago, got a claim on one of my Skyrim VODs because apparently Sons of Skyrim was copyrighted music, even though it was the song that plays literally every time you run into a dragon.
Yep, but that's because of third-party bots that do it. Even if they're not affiliated with Bethesda or ZeniMax in any way, they're still just going to go ahead and do it for basically on the behalf of the companies without their own permission.
Meanwhile, up until a few months ago on Twitch and the big multiple million DMCA claims they had, the worst that would happen to you on Twitch if you had copyrighted music in a VOD is they just mute the copyrighted music side.
But now their bots, although those third-party ones now have discovered the clip system for the first time. So you have that whole issue now where that whole system needs to be an overhaul. That requires money on Twitch's part. Well, Twitch isn't profitable, so you have that whole issue come back again. They're not going to invest in it, so that's why they never banned anyone for it, because they're just going to grandfather people.
So I just took to...
Which is fine.
I just took to not having break music at all, because it used to be a thing for me, was I would put on a series of YouTube songs while I was going to break to go, empty my bladder or to go take an ice cream and sit down with my mother or something. I don't do that anymore, simply because Twitch as much as said, while we used to allow that because of all these claims, be safe, don't use anything that isn't from the game.
I still ignore it. I just don't play certain artists that are very likely to be caught by bots. I use the artists that either I've reached out to personally and they've said, yep, go for it, or ones that I know aren't going to be caught. And in fact, there's even some artists that have put together little, how should I put it, like music packs basically of, hey, here are songs we're going to make that they're going to basically reach out to their whoever and be like, hey, make sure your bots aren't capturing this music.
Free music archive for that. Same idea is that there's a whole search category there where it's like, okay, this can be used in videos that are posted online.
And I love the fact that some of these big name, huge artists, rappers even, and others that are just like, nope, we're just going to go ahead and, put together stuff for y'all, or we're just going to give you flat out permission because we prefer streamers basically providing free marketing.
Even then, it's a bit of a gray area because back in the MySpace days, talking about ancient nerd history here, there were a couple of bands that put, one of their albums, entirely in MP3s on their own MySpace site. And they got C&D'd by their own label for violating their copyright.
I will never forget. This was last month. No, not last month. This was June. Back when that whole issue happened with the clips and everything. One of the male streamers reached out to 21 Savage of all people. And the rapper was like, oh, hell no. Just go ahead and play it. Just gave basically flat out permission publicly. And it's just, I love how gaming has become mainstream enough where even these artists and others are just like, nope, we want you guys to play your music. We want you to promote us. We want you to do all this other stuff.
It got so
we even have Hollywood people like Terry Crews learn how to build a computer because
it got so restrictive on YouTube though that they were saying you can't stream this or this game, or there were on YouTube you had to get the permission from the company to stream their game on YouTube, or else you could get claimed. I made a big point anytime I played a game to put in, all the legalese boilerplate off their website, pointing out, that they gave permission for that game to be streamed as a comment on each video I put out.
Yeah, a lot of companies though have loosened up on that. It's not quite so bad.
Well, one of the worst ones for that on YouTube was
Nintendo?
Yeah, Nintendo. They had for the longest while. If you wanted to stream for monetization on YouTube for Nintendo games, or you had to join a specific Nintendo's content club thing, which superseded YouTube's monetization and used Nintendo's rates, which were worse. They only let you stream from a select, and they claim this list held true for all of their, all games on any of their consoles. This was at the time, mind you. I don't know what it is now. But
the list is longer. They're a lot more forgiving. They've come to realize what every other developer and publisher has come to realize. Twitch streamers can make you a lot of money. And same with YouTubers. Like if people see your game and they really like it, people are going to spend the money and play your game. What else do you think? Like Fall Guys, I mentioned earlier, is putting so much time and effort into all of us streamers giving out keys for them to get lots and lots of people to play the game. And guess what? Make lots and lots of sales.
Well, company involvement with streamers can be a double-edged sword. You've heard about the big kerfluffle about the ban that happened recently for WoW and Blizzard, right?
Which ones? There's lots of different bans that have happened with Blizzard lately.
Well, basically what happened was, as a PvPer, it's a common tactic for priests to hang out, around the enemy main cities and just dispel people who come out of, like, say, Stormwind or Orgrimmar with world buffs. To take the, Oath of the Dragon Slayer or the Might of the War Chief or whatever the crap they're called. The stuff you get for the Mountain Onyxia's head.
Yes, but there also are whole guilds doing stuff with the whole opening of the gates and Silithus type stuff where they're literally getting whole guilds basically banned so that they can't get certain achievements and mounts and stuff.
Well, here's what I'm talking about was what happened I'm not talking about AQ. This is something that happened a few weeks earlier. Well, there was, that the dispelling of world buffs in Classic was a common thing. You probably got up to it.
A lot of world buffs were useful. I mean, good grief. We had that one group literally do Onyxia without any armor or weapons. They were all naked.
Right.
Gearless.
Well,
it was all thanks to the buffs.
Well, one night a GM was hanging out in one popular streamer's Twitch, watching the guy play. Well, he left his capital city, a priest, dispelled the world buffs off of him. Well, that GM immediately got on their GM account and proceeded to ban the guy for life for griefing. Again, common tactic on PvP servers, where the rules of playing nice don't really apply, because corpse camping, ruining somebody's fun for hours on end is a thing.
Yeah, but don't forget, Blizzard fired a lot of people. They then now have people applying for those exact same jobs not long later that they let people go, despite the fact it only saved the company a tiny little bit of money.
Well,
They kept a lot of assholes in certain positions there, so people who get butthurt tend to abuse power.
Well, one
It's
thing
been a
I've noticed
history with Blizzard.
Yeah, true. One thing I've noticed about big corporations is they'll lay off or let go of a lot of their, experienced lower level staff so they can hire a bunch of people working for $2 to $3 less an hour.
That's how I left my previous job. They're paying me too much. They wanted
Oh.
someone cheaper and dumber.
I ended up leaving my job with Dell after 4 years, making 25 cents less an hour than I did going in, because every time I shifted departments, and they made a point of shifting you at least once, maybe once every 2 to 3 years. And every time you shift a department, they would drop you to the base pay scale and then add on whatever promotions or whatever pay raises you've had since then. So I started with tech making $8.25 an hour in 2001. I left after being shifted to sales and to customer or to financial services and then back to tech, where the starting pay when I went in, or starting pay by the time that I quit, was $7.25 an hour. They dropped it a full buck, but I had 75 cents an hour worth of raises over the time. So I quit that job making 25 cents less than I went in, because I asked about grandfathering and I was told, ha, no. But basically, back to the GM and WoW thing, the guy abused power, and apparently it got back to Blizzard that this guy did this, which was a violation of their policies, and they let him go. And
Blizzard's been surprisingly pretty good about trying to correct certain issues with the community as of late. And I think that's part of their new policy, which has kind of come from how they've been doing Shadowlands development, in which they've actually been listening to a lot of community members and not making certain mistakes. So I think it's almost a precursor to maybe some good changes on their part, despite what Activision has obviously done and a lot of this other derps Blizzard has done, both before and after Activision's been involved.
Well, the funny thing is, people are complaining about Blizz firing the guy because they're saying, well, that was griefing, wasn't it? And I'm thinking, you've never played on a PvP server, have you?
No, most people don't. They tend to not want to risk things.
Which is ironic, since if have you taken a look at WoW Classic?
No, never really had the time. It's not as hard as some people claimed Classic to be.
Well, a lot of it boils down to learning the mechanics, learning the tweaks, learning the tricks, learning how the game wants to be played. Well, part of what I mean is, when you go to look at the WoW Classic server list, over half of the servers, over half of the total amount of servers are all PvP, and inevitably those are always the most populated servers.
That's because open world PvP was at its height back then. It's normal.
And I'll admit, I've had those days where I've had multiple hours where I was corpse camped, or people were saying, look, just stay out of this zone. There's gankers here, just find somewhere else to play for today. Or we had a very efficient network of that wasn't even using the world defense channels. I forgot I think we were somewhat, notifying people, hey, there's a big amount of horde coming in from so and such server. You might want to make your exit before they get here. That sort of thing. But I remember those days. I remember, feeling relief when I went to go play on a normal server, but I also remember one thing I got into back at that time was being very situationally aware. Learning to stay off the roads, learning alternate routes through places that were, less dangerous. Trying to vary up which ways I went through places just in case people were hiding here or there at the time. Accepting that I was going to end up dead most likely anyway, so don't get upset about it. Trying to figure out just how fast I could res, bubble up, and hearth out. Because I was a filthy paladin bubble hearther. And no matter how weak, I remember thinking, no matter how weak we were, people always said that was OP because we had our ultimate get out of PvP button, except for, we had to not be Mez to be able to bump it.
If you want to join the Ultima Dragons, you can do so at udic.org, where you can choose your very own dragon name. You can also find the Ultima Dragons on Facebook. We have a Facebook group there. And you can follow at Ultima Dragons on Twitter, or join them on Discord. And if you're feeling really old school, you can even fire up a Telnet client and check out the Weremount. Hit up the show notes for links to all of these. If you want to participate more directly in the podcast, you can send us an email, or if you're feeling a little bit braver, leave us a voice message in one of 3 places: the podcast website, our Facebook page, or on anchor.fm. And you're also welcome to join us on our Discord server to chat with us, to lurk, or even contribute to podcast recordings when they happen. And again, links in the show notes. If you'd like to support Spam Humbug, you can do so at patreon.com/ultimacodex, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to episodes the day before they go live to the general public. You'll also get access to behind-the-scenes audio when we have some to share, and possibly other interesting content. But we also welcome your moral support. You can like the Ultima series on Facebook, follow at Ultima Codex on Twitter, or leave the podcast a review on iTunes. And you're also welcome to share our episodes with your friends and social media circles. Spam Humbug is a production of the Ultima Codex. You can find show notes online at spamhumbug.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, be virtuous.